Hey, everybody. Welcome to Monday Night Therapy. And tonight I'm joined. Todd is out sick because he's a pansy. And Andy, I have a plane to catch. Ketterson is with me. And we are joined by Ramzy Nasrallah, of executive editor of 11 Warriors, which is a very large Ohio State Buckeye site. And we're going to talk about the Ohio State Buckeyes because we wanted to know what the hell is going on over there, Ramzy.
I think they're coping as hard as any football program has ever coped. And they're doing it in, I think, a pretty productive, healthy, and audacious way. I can't say that
okay.
I disapprove.
We're going to start this out with this. Is Michigan, are they the saddest national title winners in the history of national title winners?
God, I hope so. I mean, it's pretty inspiring what they've done. It reminds me of I think I saw this meme somewhere on Twitter, the beginning of The Dark Knight Rises, when Bane's like, they expect one of us to be in the wreckage. And they're just leaving Sharon Moore in the plane, and everyone else is piecing out to go to Los Angeles or anywhere else, but Ann Arbor. I don't hate it. But yeah, it's not how you want to spend the month after your national title.
No. Just so everybody knows, the hate is strong in this one.
Oh, good.
But we are going to go to Ohio State. And I'm going to, okay. Ohio State's been beat. I didn't look this up. This is off the top of my head, so it might be completely wrong. You've lost 3 straight to Michigan.
That's right.
You've lost 3 straight Big Ten titles.
No, they've lost 3 straight, now defunct RIP Eastern Division titles. They were playing games for the Big Ten title game, which is how it should be. That's how it was before Nebraska joined. It was Ohio State, Michigan, the end of the season, and now there's just an extra game in Indy where you get to beat a Big West team. But that's now gone. There's no more divisions. But yes, 3 straight.
Okay. I've seen a lot of Ohio State fans that feel like Ryan Day should be fired. And all of us, I mean, Ohio State is going to be good no matter who the coach is. And we're Nebraska, for God's sakes. At some one point, I'm sure that a lot of people felt that way. We felt that way. I don't think I ever did it. I always thought, you can't take a legendary coach like Tom Osborne and replace him with another guy and just say, well, he was a legendary coach. Like they pop up, all over. You just go to the grocery store and buy legendary coaches off the shelf, like they're purple coaches or something, But
you did though. You did it. You got Frank Solich. You let him cook, and then 20 years later, Nebraska was still awesome. Oh wait, what happened with that?
Yeah,
you're not supposed to be shooting back yet. We're not even 5 minutes in.
Cadillac, and he wrapped it around a fucking tree.
So, how do you feel about that? The whole Ryan Day should be fired thing.
I get it. I don't agree with it. I came to the conclusion this year, this particular third loss, that he put a premium on being right instead of trying to get it right. He wanted to solve it his own way. He wanted to go about cracking the code in Ryan Day fashion, when he's making a lot of the same mistakes that I'm looking at 3 crusty guys on my screen right now. I've seen Ohio State lose 3 straight to Michigan before. I've seen them do it more than once because I've lived long enough to see it. And he's repeating mistakes like the 2022 loss, the second of the 3, was like a 1996 special where they played scared. There's the reason that people wanted him fired. I think that's changed over the last month or so, is that no one's going to diminish how powerful the recruiting has been at Ohio State, even before they figured out the NIL strategy very recently. Loading up on 5 stars, even mediocre 4 stars like Marvin Harrison Jr., and then taking them off the field on like 4th and 1 on the Michigan side of the field to bring in the worst special teams in the history of the program. Like, repeat over and over and over again. It's not that he needs to be fired. He needed to remove one of his 4 jobs from his burden on game day. He could be the head coach, lead recruiter, offensive coordinator, and quarterback teacher when you're playing Western Kentucky when you're playing, most Big West programs, not Nebraska, obviously, but against Michigan, there was so much in-game, like self-inflicted chicanery. It was unbelievable. Some of the decisions that were made, and some that, like, frankly, even in real, it's easy to watch on television. Emeka Ibuka falls forward for a first down. The refs take a yard off the spot, not because they're crooked or there's a conspiracy. Refs sometimes spot the ball wrong. If you're not holding down 4 jobs, maybe you challenge it and you get a first down.
Right.
And they bring in Jesse Murko for one of his 2 30-yard punts in that game on the wrong side of the field. And so what you've seen over the last month, the people that are like, you got to get him out of there, have seen he's making the corrections that people have been screaming for since this started happening in 2021. He brought in Bill O'Brien for 3 glorious weeks to call the plays. And
that one, one, what did you think of that?
I think I knew why he was there. It's an image rehabilitation tour for Bill O'Brien. An accomplished coach. He's burned some bridge work along the way. Was probably coming to Columbus for a 2-year stint, 3-year stint before he got a Boston College-like offer. I think he got that offer specifically because Ohio State hired him to be offensive coordinator. Otherwise, he's probably figuring out what to do in the meantime. But he wasn't coming in to bring in like a Bill O'Brien offense. It's Ryan Day's offense is fine. It's the in-game coaching. It's the quarterback tutelage beyond the starter. I think Kyle McCord is more of a glitch than a trend. And so now you've got Ryan Day bringing in his college coach, mentor, and first boss, which is all the same guy, 60-year-old Chip Kelly, to run an offense that's not going to be – I wonder if this is the question I can't answer for you. Ryan Day likes deep crossing routes, inside zone, outside zone. His offense is pretty well studied, and with the right guys, it's really hard to stop, especially if you have a focused play caller who's not distracted. Chip Kelly is about an innovative rushing attack. He runs the ball over half the time. When you look at Oregon or the Eagles, I don't even know about the 49ers season he was there. It was a disaster. But UCLA, pretty innovative running team. That's going to really benefit. If they can find a way to happily marry the two philosophies, it's going to be the kind of offense that Ohio State fans have always thought was possible with Ryan Day because of 2019 when you had J.K. Dobbins, you had Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, like everything was loaded to be excellent, and they've been trying to catch up to that 2019 team ever since. It's been a lot more pass happy than run happy, and I think it's in part because things have gotten more complicated for Day. He really uncomplicated his job over the last 35 days.
Yeah, I think I guess when I saw him hire Bill O'Brien, I thought, what the hell is that? That is just it's like a placeholder. It's like, hey, here's this guy that's pretty, I don't know, like a vanilla shake without the vanilla,
When Nebraska was searching for coaches, a lot of people kept throwing his name out there. And that was honestly the name that was like, I had like 2 names where I'm like, do not get either of these. And that was Will O'Brien, just because I'm like, vanilla. It's the exact word I was going to use. He just seems so bland and vanilla. His offenses do. And I think Chip Kelly was an inspired piece of hiring by you guys. Damn it.
That is. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say, I would have liked to see what Chip Kelly could have done, especially with some of the receivers that have been there the past few years that have, all just landed one after the other on NFL rosters. And I think he could have found a more creative use for them, to be honest. Oh, and one other quick line when you're talking about Ryan Day there, though, because they were still undefeated going into the Michigan game, right? And
2 years in a row.
Yeah,
they've only lost to Michigan during the regular season.
Right, and it reminded me of we had a really funny ex-coach called Tom Osborne that was just always had people rolling, not at all. But one of his funny lines was at a time where he said the toughest thing about being the coach of Nebraska is convincing the fans that 10-1 is not a losing season. Yeah. And that's kind of where I see Ryan Day on the hot seat. I can't remember like his overall record, but it's like 50 something and under 10.
Three.
Yeah.
I think it's
He's
3
lost 8
losses.
games,
He's lost 8.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Since, 20
That son of a
But that's
bitch should be.
yeah. And
What
yeah,
the
and
hell?
I don't see them trending down. I just see them. It's like just a little tinker here or there, and they're right back. It's not like suddenly, oh, there's no talent anymore or anything like Michigan's the one I think, probably closer to us in recruiting than you guys this year. And let's just say that I'm both impressed and a little disappointed just for the rest of us trying to keep pace that you hired Chip Kelly, because if there's one thing he does know how to do, it's run an offense. The whole team.
Why did Chip Kelly give up a head coaching job to come to your poverty program?
I think he hates recruiting. It's you choose your profession out of college. He chose coaching.
Right.
Kind of toiled around where he's from, Manchester, New Hampshire. Kind of stays in state. Builds up a brand running New Hampshire, and gets hired to run Oregon's offense, right, in the 2000s. Ascends to the head coaching job, does it really well, moves on to the NFL, comes back to college. He's at UCLA. He's tinkering around as a true football nerd, reinventing their offense. He had one quarterback he really liked. He's now with the Browns over the tenure he was there. I think he just wants to call plays and be a geek. And I think that's where can I be comfortable? He's known Ryan Day since he recruited him. And that should work out pretty well. I think that Day really missed having a trusted advisor, a consigliere, and a bit of a mentor at Ohio State, with Kevin Wilson leaving last year to go to Tulsa. But that all being said, I don't think Kevin Wilson was ever really his mentor. He was brought in by Urban Meyer after 2016 to be a trusted advisor on what can we do to keep the offense from being stale? How can I get sanity checked on some of the decisions I make? Because I say a lot of things about Urban Meyer. He figured out in the middle of his Ohio State tenure, he wasn't perfect with decision making, and he needed someone to speak at him when he might have been going off the reservation. He didn't trust a lot of the guys he had. He trusted Greg Schiano. He trusted Kevin Wilson. And when Urban retired, that transition's really tough. And Day kept a lot of those guys in-house. Schiano now runs Rutgers. Kevin Wilson now runs Tulsa. This year, there was no one really challenging him. He had Brian Hartline as kind of a offensive coordinator in title, but those, I can't imagine those disagreements were very long discussions. So bringing in a guy who really coached him and then supervised him, I think will be really, really helpful for the team next year. I do want to mention, when Nebraska joined the conference, it was 2011. Bill O'Brien took over after Joe Paterno was fired.
Yes.
And that was an impossible situation. That was the most radioactive football program outside of SMU that I've seen in my lifetime. And they went 8-4 with a decimated roster. I mean, I think Tim Beckman from Illinois was at Penn State recruiting players from the Penn State practice facility while that was all going down. It was a complete disaster. I didn't know who Bill O'Brien was, but they had two very serviceable seasons. They played Penn State football while he was there, and he parlayed that into another role, which I think was the perfect thing. You don't want to be the guy that follows a legend. You want to be the guy that follows the guy that follows the legend, and that's what he did. And I think he was just there to improve his network, get a little bit better, and then go on to whatever's next. He did coach a Heisman Trophy winning quarterback at Alabama, and I know he doesn't get a lot of credit for it, but he was there for multiple years.
You're shattering our milquetoast Bill O'Brien attitude here.
the best coaches allow the great players to be the best versions of themselves and then give them appropriate guardrails, which I think Day's really good at doing when he only has 1 or 2 jobs. When he has 4 jobs, it doesn't go quite as well.
So basically what you're saying in a nutshell is nobody said to Ryan Day after the Notre Dame game, don't take on a really old retired guy about being soft. Nobody said, don't bring up Lou Holtz. Just don't shut up. Don't even care about him. This year somebody will be there. Yeah, it was. I don't know. In some ways I thought it was, I can understand where he's coming from. And at the same time, you're kind of like, I don't know why. Who gives a shit what Lou Holtz think? The guy left every program he was at, and NCAA violations, and I guess when you're a winner, everybody overlooks those things. But I don't. I like Ryan Day.
Sorry.
I do. I respect him. I think he's a good coach. I think he's got the whole world on his shoulders. But I was shocked when I saw people were so angry they wanted him fired.
But he was making John Cooper mistakes, like the
Yeah.
exact the John Cooper. There's been as history gets further away from you, you tend to lose some of the details. John Cooper's last John Cooper Michigan loss was 1996. He got there after 87. And all the games where they puckered in the early 90s, like all those games they lost to Michigan, they lost generally the same way. A lot of times they had better players and they still found a way to lose them. 97, when Michigan ran the table, all the way until Cooper was fired after 2000, he was not losing Coop-style games. He was either beating Michigan, which he did during that stretch, or losing to better Michigan teams where they ran out of years where we don't recruit, we don't rebuild, we reload. They started having to rebuild, especially after 98. And when they didn't win the national title the year after Nebraska and Michigan were neck and neck, that was the best team he was ever going to have. They found a way to squander that season. They still beat Michigan, but they lost to Michigan State, Saban. And he was never the same. But he was aggressive in all those. They lost the last 3 games against 99 and 2000. He lost both of those to Michigan, but he was aggressive. They were innovative. They saved some. He was doing it the right way. He was just losing to better teams. Ryan Day is losing early Coop era Michigan style, and for old heads like me, that's what freaked out a lot of people. They were like, we've seen this before, man. John Cooper's from Tennessee. Ryan Day's from New Hampshire. They do not get us. They do not understand that you can't outsmart this game. The very clever saying over the last couple of years is that Ohio State built itself to beat Georgia, and Michigan constructed itself to beat Ohio State.
Right.
And I thought that was a little bit too cute. And then not the most recent college football playoff, but the one prior, Michigan beats Ohio State by 23, which if you want to talk about sign stealing and Connor Stallions, I think you saw the difference between Ohio State not being able to do anything and basically a push game, which was the one that we just saw in Ann Arbor, where it was went down to the last drive. Ohio State then goes to the Peach Bowl and runs circles around Georgia for 3.5 quarters. Their defense was not back yet. And so giving up big plays, having the worst special teams in program history, that's what kept them from beating. They were constructed to beat Georgia. They lost on the margins. Once you figure out what I think Day is figuring out, not by going out and buying, having this innovative 1-month NIL spree where they're retaining proven commodities and not buying recruits, but guys that, keeping them for an extra year to get them from the 3rd round to 2nd or fringe 1st round. I think you're seeing him solving the puzzle with what toughness, what culture, what having, adults in the room with helmets on can do for the program instead of loading up on, recruiting stars and then playing it safe when you really shouldn't. And that's how he's lost the last couple of seasons, even with garbage defense. Gets to the Michigan game and just starts playing a field position game, taking no chances, taking Marvin Harrison off the field for 2 30-yard punts. What are you doing, man? He lost it again that way. I don't think they'll lose to Michigan the same way. That being said, I have no idea what Michigan's going to look like in September. I know who the head coach is going to be, and that's about it.
Right. I don't know. Jim Harbaugh is he's such a wackadoodle. I could say so many words there, but he's such a weird guy. Somehow it works out for him, but I don't know. Andy, you got anything?
Don't you think though you have to be a weird guy to be successful? You can't have all your screws or have them all tight.
I agree with that. I think that I think if you're I think if you can't literally just take yourself and stand your own brain outside yourself and look at yourself and say, what the hell is wrong with me? Why am I not more successful? What am I doing wrong? Or have somebody that does that with you, then no, you're never going to be successful. And quite frankly, most of the really successful people are outliers and kind of freak jobs when it comes to creativity. And, you know, the chicken is what was that? Chicken is a nervous bird, that thing? Was that it?
Yeah.
That was his line at one point?
He didn't eat chicken because it's a nervous bird. But then when you see like the Michigan recruiting barbecues, it's all chicken. It's like chicken tenders, barbecue chicken, whatever. He's a funny dude. I think you need to be wired that way. It makes you more likely to be successful because college football is, if you have any sort of a conscience, or if you're like, this is part of the, I think that why Ryan Day started cutting wrestling promos in South Bend. That was not him. He's like this normal, empathetic, really smart football nerd. And he's everything's all in place, and that's probably not great to be running something like Ohio State football. Woody Hayes, perfect. You have all your screws loose. Military history. He claimed he punched the Clemson linebacker because the Clemson linebacker's dead great grandfather killed his uncle in the Civil War. Like he would say that, like, you know, kind of stuff. You want someone that insane, and Ryan Day is not that, right? So Jim Harbaugh is, and that's why I think he's so effective.
Yeah,
do we have anything? Oh, go ahead, Andy.
I was just going to say
that
that he hit on one note when we were talking about the whole Michigan scandal, that just, for me, it just, you could statistically track when Michigan had signs and didn't. It's like they start off playing like they're 3-0 games, and they're beating those teams like 31-6, 30-10, and you think they should be killing them, but they're not wasting their time going to steal those signs. And then they play us first. And I was thinking we were going to have a game like that. I didn't expect to beat them. And they're just going through this. And I literally was yelling, it's like they know what the hell we're set up in and what the hell we're running. And at the time, I have no idea that, yeah, they did. But that Ohio State game was just the perfect thing. Ohio State, loses by 3-4 touchdowns for two years to them with better teams than they had this year. And this year go neck and neck with a team that ends up winning the national championship. And right after it all came out, hey, what's one of the first things they do is we found a way to, like 2 other games, piss away the Maryland game down our leg by, what do you know, a field goal getting kicked as time ran out. And then next week, Ohio State struggles to get away and beat them. Michigan struggles and gets away to beat Maryland 31-24. And I'm like, where's the team that, that could have beaten us 72-3 if they'd wanted to? So, yeah, I don't have any, I have no, they're going to lose that title. I think that's just inevitable. I think right now, just because it's all gone quiet, maybe they think they've escaped everything and outsmarted everybody, but no, it's going to come crashing down. And just the evidence was just so brutally there. They have everything. I keep doing that. I'm not trying to do that to you, Ohio State. Michigan ends up having a guy who just gets flat busted trying to, erase the computer and destroy the evidence, and Michigan fires them. And my favorite, Harbaugh is just kind of a little liar all along. He'll lie to your face and not even blink. I think that's why he looks like the composite of a serial killer sketch artist rendering, just with that white guy with the glasses and a baseball cap and a blank stare on his face. That's just.
I'm looking at 2 of us in the mirror right now.
Well, yeah. All John needs is the hat and a haircut. but hey, our eyes move around a little. But yeah, it's just, and for him to sit there and go, yeah, I didn't know what was going on. I don't know who this guy is. It's like he's literally on your sideline, feeding your coordinators, running back and forth. And it was like somebody who used to play like Division II football told me. They said if some player starts coming up and chattering with a coordinator, it's some third string guy, they're going to scream at him, get the fuck out of here. And I'm glad you.
It's an incredible amount of evidence because it's funny. These games all have like 25 high definition cameras capturing everything.
They literally have him in the stadiums. Not just that he ran the tickets through and he bought tickets for all these other people to go sit where they could stare right at the sidelines, but they found you on the security cameras. You can't even deny that you were there. Just happen to be going to these other games and flashing away and taking notes.
The amount of intel. So Ohio State had, we're going to talk about this. They have 3 play calling packages that they rotate through. And at the end of 2022, I don't know about 2021, but at the end of 2022, Michigan had all three of those play calling packages intact prior to the Ohio State game. And you started to see, and I was not one of those people like, oh, it's like they know what they're going to call. I look at some of our forums and people were saying it in real, like they knew the play. Like, what are we tipping our signals? What's going on there? What Michigan would do is they spent the whole first half collecting data. Like, what are they running?
Did they?
Which package? Because it's dummy signals and whatever. And then the second half, like you got to, you had CJ Stroud 2 years in a row running an offense that scored no touchdowns in the second half.
Yeah.
And there are camera angles where he's at the line changing the play, and if you're looking at the Michigan sideline, the players are telling you what he's changing it to. They're standing by Stallions, like listening to him, and then
that was the other giant lie, was that the players, you can't punish the Michigan players. They don't know what's going on. I'm like, well, I thought Michigan was a pretty good school, and for the most part has some pretty smart kids on this sideline, and we're supposed to believe that they're dumb or I guess special enough to just be going, oh my God, my coordinator's a witch. He's amazing. Like, so I'm glad you said that, because it's like, there's no way the players don't know that's going on. Wow. They're running it right now. I'm going to
say something unpopular. I think it rules. That's an incredible, like, I hate that it was Michigan that finally was like, 20 years of eating shit. Like, you know what? Enough's enough. We're going to beat Ohio State or die trying. And the recipe for doing that unlocked a complete change in their culture and attitude. It's, I've seen what Ohio State had to do to dig out and beat Michigan after only knowing how to lose to them. It's like the 1994 season. That felt like, that's still, like, I've seen 2 national titles since then, and multi double-digit wins over Michigan since then. But that 94 year, it felt impossible beating them. And so in 2020, the COVID year, Ohio State was favored by 30 over Michigan. And then Michigan got COVID and canceled the game, but they practiced the next day, which something has to be true. They either all had COVID and broke COVID protocol to practice the day after the game was canceled, or they didn't have COVID and lied about it so they wouldn't have to play as a 30-point underdog. That created a bit of a buffer between just losing to Ohio State every year. And in 2021, they were legitimately good. I think people have to delineate. They didn't only win because they were cheating.
I thought that was when it started, was 21.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I don't have like Zapruder film of when Michigan began, its current iteration, but Ohio State's defense was garbage in 2020, which is a funny thing to say because they played in the CFP title game. It's a terrible defense. They played 9 games, guys. It's not like the biggest game they played was Indiana when they had Michael Penix, and they gave up 35 points.
I remember
that. They had a bad defense for a few years. I'm not going to bore your listeners with what happened there, but it's a series of unfortunate events that begins with Jeff Hafley spending 1 year in Columbus, taking the Boston College job, almost screwing Ohio State twice by leaving, and then they lose their offensive coordinator. But 5 years later, but then Chip Kelly comes to the rescue, and then Ryan Day is at first time chief executive, made a couple of bad hires. You had Matt Barnes in there, you had Kerry Combs in there. Your commenters are like, "Can we stop crying for Ohio State?" We're not crying for Ohio State. We're talking about football in February, guys.
Yeah. Okay. We were almost 30 minutes in, and we have not taken any comments. And I'm going to go with this one. MWI says, "Yeah, that Tom Osborne was a freaking weirdo." You know what? He was a freaking weirdo. Because we're so used to Tom Osborne that we don't see outside of him. What coach do you know on this planet, or honestly, what human being that runs a large organization always stays calm, never swears? I mean, you could maybe never swears is a big one, but always calm, always.
Matt Rule.
He says nasty words in the videos they put out, which is fine with me. But nobody was as weird as Tom Osborne in the fact that he was so plain and so mild and so calm. I mean, that guy, that's the weirdest coach ever.
Well,
Name another one.
I got a Tom Osborne story, because I always wondered, when he gets in the locker room, is he really just calm and gosh, darn it and all that, fellas? And Rod Smith, I had some classes with, who was a receiver in the mid-late 80s for Nebraska, led the country in punt return average one year. And we'd hang out. Well, there's one year they go out to Ames to play Iowa State, and they're only up 14-7 at half, and it's not a good-looking, well-fought 14-7. They were just out of tune, out of sorts, awful. And they come back and they just destroy them in the second half, win like 35-7 or 35-14. Well, I'm talking to Rod like in class that next week, and I was like, so what was that locker room like? He goes, oh man, we just never seen him that mad. It was gosh darn it this and dad gummit that. And
see what I mean?
He said he even raises his voice a little and his face turned really red. And they said like with the whole team, they said it was just going like, trying to do that thing. Don't notice me. Don't notice me. So they said it was the most terrified of him they'd ever been. And I'm like, so let me get this straight. Gosh darn it and dad gummit. And he's like, yeah, it was kind of scary. That's just how
that is a weird guy.
That's not normal.
That's an outlier.
Yeah,
Jim Tressel was like that. I think he said fuck once in 10 years.
Yeah,
Fred Sacco comes in with will Ohio State wear 100 different uniform combos now? It's a reference to Oregon. Or do you guys think you'll spice it up a little?
Kelly effect.
Oregon didn't do that for Chip Kelly. Oregon did that for Phil Knight.
Right.
But it could be a thing. You guys seem to have all the money on the planet.
They do, but just Nebraska. This with when Bill Callahan started tinkering with uniforms. That's sort of a similar thing there. Even the once a year, you've got the old folks being like, all right, the teens like the one alternate uniform a year. We're good with it. And that's pretty much that's the agreement. You can do it once a year.
I don't mind.
Justin Rogge says, hit the like button, which if you're on YouTube, please do that. It helps us with the algorithm. Linda Wilkins says, John, I see you have the robe of life on again tonight. You know what? If I don't wear the robe, I get complaints. So I'm figuring it's like a uniform now. You can still go out and get a CornNation t-shirt though. Let's see what else. You know what? We're going to go back into Ohio State. You guys hired a new athletic director replacing Gene Smith. And like an idiot, I wrote down everything about him, but I didn't write his name down.
Ted Carter. Maverick.
You hired an athletic director from Texas A&M. Does that worry you?
No.
Athletic director. I was pissed about the president. Sorry.
The president. Yeah. No, you took
awesome. Our Top Gun guy. He is great. But anyway,
he's awesome.
AD.
The guy from A&M previously from Ole Miss. I thought it was. I remember when we were getting intel, like this is probably going to be the guy, and sort of hashing through stories that 11 Warriors was going to run when his hiring was official, and seeing some of the buzz and people going, talking about it. Texas A&M fans being like, "Hey, thank you for taking him." I can't think of any fan base that I would go to as a for like consult less than Texas A&M. Like I feel like they're Ohio State without mood stabilizers and with petroleum. That's a very deep and weird cult. And I'm telling you, someone from Columbus, Ohio. I'm saying it with a straight face. I have weird. If you're gonna have a strong opinion about an athletic director, like I think of someone like Dave Brandon when he was at Michigan, where he ran Domino's Pizza into the ground, takes the Michigan job, starts bloating it all to hell with weird vanity projects and like filling out the administrative level of the athletic department with people who I don't even think had job descriptions. Hiring Brady Hoke, who was making $600,000 at San Diego State for 4 times that much. Like, they don't teach you that on the first day of business school, but it's like maybe the second day of business school. You shouldn't pay a 4 times multiple on an asset that no one's trying to take from you.
Yeah, we did that.
Doing everything wrong. That's a strong opinion on an athletic director who then leaves the business. I can't think of like people get mad about Gene Smith, who's been Ohio State's athletic director since the mid 2000s after he took over for Andy Geiger, and people talk about Andy Geiger, and there's like negative. People just get negative about administrators, and I get it because they make a ton of money, and they sit behind a desk and they call shots and talk about sports all the time. There's some envy, and also they're nerds, and their administrator. I get it, but like, I would only get wound up about it if someone were as destructive and incompetent as Dave Brandon, and then who was also had this veneer of, if you don't like me, Michigan fans, find another team to root for.
Yeah,
Handled the PR very poorly. That's where I would get wound around the axle. Our new athletic director, Ohio State's previous several athletic directors. I think the last one I was peeved at was Jim Jones, who retired curiously at the age of 47. And now, after the fact, there was like a very significant and tragic abuse scandal that involved now deceased doctor and mostly wrestling wrestlers at Ohio State. He abruptly retired in his late 40s, I think in part because of what was happening there. And I thought that was weird. I thought that was curious at the time, and I hate him now. It took ex post facto to see that. But other than Dave Brandon and guys who were, Bill Curley at Penn State, people who were like, had the chance to do the right thing and were cowards, I can't get upset about that. So no, I have no strong opinion in either direction on our new athletic director. No.
Okay. I just thought it was that they'd looked at A&M. I think that once you've been touched by A&M, you carry that with you wherever you go. You know what I mean? I worked at A&M. I actually in 1980 I put in their sound. Well, I not for A&M, but I literally put their fire alarm system and their sound system in Kyle Field in like 1980 when they did a stadium expansion. I was there for 2 summers working on that. And I was around a lot of them, and I was just like, what the hell? I didn't realize it. I was too young I was too ignorant of what was going on in Texas with football to understand them. But then later I was looking back and you kind of go, my God, these people are unique. They're just unique. That's what they are. They're unique. And you know what? Thank God that they exist so that people that are like them can go to Texas A&M and be with people of their own kind. And you took one of them out of there and made him in charge of stuff.
One of the funniest stories I ever heard was when Mike Leach was still at Texas Tech, and they're getting ready to play A&M, and Mike just expounded on what he thought of starting your own little army and shaving heads and putting uniforms on it. And he's like, these guys aren't even a real army. He goes, he said, I'm going to make a pirate army of my own here at Texas Tech. And, when you're a freshman, we'll give you an eye patch, and we'll give you the big hat when you're a sophomore, and a parrot when you're a junior, and a peg leg when you're a senior. And the A&M crowd just lost their goddamn minds. And then Texas Tech goes in there and beats them that campus the next week. And not to mention the alumni halls just still, must have been killing cats and dogs on the side. It was one of the funniest. It's one of the best troll jobs, right? Right up there with Steve Spurrier calling Florida State Free Shoes University and just making Bobby Bowden flustered all the time. I loved every minute of it. I miss Coach Leach.
Yeah.
Never boring.
I think they found a guy who's got experience with weird cults. Ole Miss and A&M, is accustomed to having money at his disposal. I don't think he didn't he retained Jimbo after he went 9-1. It's like, hey, he retained Jimbo Fisher. He went 9-1. He's doing well.
Right.
The trajectory, that's go back, knowing nothing about what's happened since then. Guy won a national title at Florida State. He was 9-1 at Texas A&M. I get it. I think Ohio State's less complicated than his previous job, and they actually win stuff. A&M doesn't do that.
Right.
Okay. From that, actually win stuff. You've got Oregon and 3 other teams that UCLA just hired a coach that I don't know why.
Sean Foster, he's awesome.
Is he?
Yeah.
Do you think
he
so?
Played there. Yeah, he's been a coach for a few years.
Well, that whole played there thing doesn't always work out, I've heard.
It's a tough place to win, man. You need Dick Vermeil. It's hard. Speaking of guys that didn't have it all there, it's like a combination of Harbaugh and Norman Rockwell. Those are hard to come by. I think alumnus. I have a hard time challenging an alumnus hire where he's gonna give a damn, right?
Well, that's true. Okay. Ohio State, Michigan looks. I don't know. Michigan looks like they're not going to retain their. I don't think they're going to just keep moving along like they were.
Never count them out, man.
I mean, they're not going to be bad. But you've got Oregon coming in. I think that they're going to move right up into the top. What I constantly talk about is being in the top 4 of the Big Ten. You have a really good chance of being in the college football playoff because this is more like the NFL than we've ever seen. And I'm going to put Ohio State and Oregon in the top 2. That's, right away. And then, USC, I don't really, Lincoln Riley, not really a fan of his. UCLA, I don't think they're going to be doing that. Washington lost Kalen DeBoer, and I think he was a really good coach. So, I mean, what do you see happening with, the pecking order here? I want to put it this way before you start. I want to put Nebraska in that top 4, but you can't. You can't do that. As much as we love the offseason, we win the offseason until we actually win anything. You can't be, anything but I don't know, really drunk or complete homer to just say we're going to just rise up there immediately. So, okay, go ahead.
I'll be the first non-Nebraska fan on your show to congratulate you on bowl eligibility, and I think 8 wins probably this year. I think the world of Rule as a college coach. I think you're going to be really happy this year. I think the top tier is Oregon, Penn State, Ohio State, in any particular order. I think Penn State's going to be really good this year. I think very highly of Drew Aller. He would have been at Ohio State if not for like Quinn Ewers doing a 1-year junket in Columbus. It's going to be interesting also because there's no who cares about divisions anymore. It's about being the top 12, give or take a G5 team sliding in there. Ohio State just had its worst year in a decade, and they finished 10th after the bowl game. So now that we are a mini NFL that we're all rooting for,
okay, who's got
the objectives have changed. So who cares about who's going to win the Big Ten? You just get to that second season.
Who's a good boy? I hear a dog.
Oh, she's snoring behind me. You have one too?
Yeah, it's
somebody's a good boy.
Esther has gotten into the habit of coming right into the shows and interrupting them by having to go to the bathroom. Apparently, nobody else in my house is paying attention anymore. So she's
oh yeah, that's your dog. Mine's asleep.
Yeah, she's getting I had things in my head that talk. Andy, take over for God's sake.
All right, yeah, you scratched the dog. Hey, and I think you had a money message up there too.
I did. Yeah, we did get a super chat, so we need to read
super chat. That's what it is.
Drake B. Westfield, thank you for the $5. It is really something to compare how quickly college coaches, even with big programs, are hired compared to NFL teams. Okay.
I don't know about that. I was going to say, weren't there eight new NFL coaches this year? I feel like the NFL still pulls the trigger pretty quick. You can name the guys who are with one team forever, but I guess I see what he's saying.
It's different. It's a different kind of vanity.
Yeah,
you've got administrators, trustees, faculty, staff, existing coaches, and players to deal with in college. In the NFL, you've got like trust fund money, decrepit, horrible old people, a general manager, and that's it.
Right. Yeah, and there's so many coaches, like I feel like getting out of college just because they don't have that complete control over their players anymore. It's like, hey, they get to go out and actually make some money on their name, and now they can transfer like any other student that's on a scholarship but the school's not paying. But I love all this. I realize it's going to be the Wild West for a while, but everybody that got pissed, like coaches or really old white guys and whatever, I always said I'm fine with not paying the players, but then I want the coaches to be capped at like $75,000 a year and have to teach a class. No TV games, $5 to get into the stadium. Then we're all on the same level. It's just I never understood.
I can't subscribe to that.
I mean, I just never understood other than pure jealousy. Like I was never that good, or it's bullshit. A kid gets paid that much when I have a shitty job, which I think is most of it. But I just never understood. Other than that, what's the problem? That honestly, they're still underpaid. But I just brought that up because that's a reason that, some coaches won't say it, but you see a lot of these older guys just, enough of this. I want to be able to tell them, if they can or cannot transfer, and tell them which teams they can't play for and stuff like that, which, looking back on it, just absolutely ridiculous. Anyway.
Yeah. It's hard. You can't unbake that cake. And I don't think we want to. And if you look back, you'll see. So I was in a documentary that I think is being shopped to Netflix or somewhere, talking about what would have happened if the current climate had happened 10 years ago. It's centered around Terrell Pryor.
Okay.
How much money did that guy lose by being born too soon?
Right.
And you can keep going back and saying that it's the Wild West right now. It's also like an indictment of how vacant NCAA leadership is in terms of putting the bones together for a tenable structure where you can get insurance for players to guard their future value as a vocational devotee to football. We don't have that right now. So what I think we'll see now is a bolus of programs like Ohio State, funded programs. I think Nebraska would be among them. Michigan's obviously among them. A couple of SEC schools. There are some, non-poverty programs that can, right now, before someone wakes up and decides to show some leadership, can put together what Ohio State put together over the last 35 days, retain their borderline first-round draft picks and give them something that is de-risked for a final year with NIL opportunities to also enhance their personal brands before they take the next step, but also give them something to believe in that's not just a bag of money. We had a bag of money era and bovine hormones and all that for I was alive for it. We've now gone to the point where we're trying to optimize bodies for the maximum number of compensatory plays that they can expend in the NFL. And they're oriented towards, what am I going to be doing at age 35? How's my money going to be managed before I hit 35? And what can I do to take care of myself from the neck up and from the neck below in different ways? Yep. And the NCAA is just sitting there going like, oh, like Looney Tunes. It's happening too fast for them, in part. And I'm going to disparage old people, even though the three of us are on here, older people. It's happening too fast for them. Well, it's happening for them too fast, and they want to do it their own way instead of bringing in some nimble McKinsey corporate slugs to figure it out for them more quickly.
Right. Now, one thing, The Athletic did a survey, I want to say about mid-fall of recruits, like an anonymous survey of just, like junior and seniors in high school that were being highly recruited. And of the top 5 things, NIL was down the list on the average. It was like, 4th or 5th. And I think the reason for that is mostly everybody's going to be throwing about the same money at the top guys for high school, because they're not paying the high school guys. It seems like they're saving most of that money for the proven guys in the portal. But for the high school kids, it was just like, well, the money's there no matter where we go. So it really is just about finding the place we feel the most comfortable or like that offense the best. It was funny how the reasons you should be choosing a school are the reasons a lot of them are actually using to choose a school. Now, one thing I wanted to ask you real quick, since we got somebody else here, what do you think of, I don't know, whatever they called it, that council, that, get together, whatever, between the SEC and the Big Ten? Because I'm wondering, okay, is this just kind of like the first wave of what's going to become, all right, us two are breaking away, who's coming with us? And we're going to start our own, like, basically school-sponsored pro league.
I think look at European soccer.
Yeah.
This is the beginning of a Premier League. And it would be simplistic to be like, yeah, it'll be the Big Ten and the SEC. I mean, is it going to be the whole Big Ten and the whole SEC? Like Vandy, Northwestern, are you coming with? Like, I think that was they could have done that very quietly, the way that the Big Ten negotiated with the 2 California schools, Oregon and Washington.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't do it quietly. They almost cut a press release like, we are talking to each other.
Yeah.
Wake up and start doing something. We are not all the same. So I think it was very purposeful, and both of those commissioners know what they're doing. I couldn't say that about the Big Ten commissioner a couple of years ago. He belongs with the Vikings or the Bears,
yes,
not with university presidents, right?
Just somewhere else.
a classic operations guy who does not
Yeah.
belong in the executive.
Yeah.
Right.
But the two guys that the SEC and the Big Ten have running, those are executive guys. They lean on ops guys. That's the way it should be oriented. So
Okay.
yeah, I think that we've got 5 years to figure this out before this becomes unrecognizable.
Right. And not only is Petiti an executive guy, he's an executive guy with a background in television. And I think that was very, very intentional. Because right now, it's almost like the networks, now that they're into it for so much money, they're pulling the strings.
Yeah, distribution is everything with this. Right. And that's what they've figured out. That's what Jim Delaney figured out before everyone else.
Right.
So you've got the NCAA basically is like you said, it's devoid of leadership. They're not doing anything. They have lawsuits against them for billions of dollars of liabilities that we all know that they're going to lose, and it's a matter of time. The National Labor Relations Board has ruled that Dartmouth's basketball team is employees. There's an enrollment cliff coming in college that is going to blast colleges, probably a mass wave of bankruptcy, but it's going to be a bloodbath for colleges because they just can't maintain all of them that they built. Most of the smaller programs, other than maybe 10, run a deficit in their athletic departments despite making millions and millions of dollars. Where the hell is all this going? You have business experience. Where do you think it's going? And I guess when I ask that, I get an idea of where it's going for. I don't see Nebraska being left out because we're a brand. We have money. We have will. And that third thing is probably the most important thing out of all of it. But I guess I also look at it and I think Division II and Division III, they're just going to be club teams all over the place. And how is that going to survive in providing opportunities? There is a certain level of, public sector, commie. It can't all just be freaking money in sports. It has to be, some of it is, I got the chance to play basketball in high school and college, even though I wasn't very good at Division III school. There's still a lot of opportunity in that. And there's still a lot of benefit in that. When you go look at resumes and things like that, of people you're going to hire in the future, those are at the top of the list, aren't they?
Division III basketball players.
Well, you know what I mean. If you go through, I've gone through shit tons of resumes in my life, and you look for people who have been in leadership positions. I always look for military service, athleticism, if they played on teams, if they did things. So that was a lot of stuff. Where do you think all this is going? That's what I want.
I think the purest form of collegiate athletics a decade from now will be what you did, Division III, where you're proving that you can manage a full course load, but also be an athlete who participates in a team structure. What you'll see as we ascend to a Premier League or Liga, with like we have in European soccer, you'll start to see different tiers emerge. And right now, over the last 50 years, we've had this we have a 132 team tier right now that you can't name all 132. There's 65 Power 5 teams. It means only half of the of FBS is that you can really name. So that's starting to settle out. It could have been accelerated and structured with some leadership, but instead we're going to go through growing pains. And when you have something like that, in the absence of leadership or structure, you have grift. And so part of what you were saying earlier is where does the money go? These state schools are nonprofits. It goes into real estate and infrastructure projects. It goes into administrator salaries. I remember when Wisconsin's chancellor was admonishing Alabama for, I think, a contract for Nick Saban that seems quaint now. It was like getting $6.5 million a year. And she's like, that's absurd. Wisconsin notoriously underpaying for sports. We'll never do that. And I remember it's University of Wisconsin-Madison. It's a public institution. I looked her up. She made like $800,000 a year.
Yeah.
What do chancellors do? Are they chanceling all day? Like what is that job? And so where does the money go? I think the people who are in charge of the money decide where the money goes. It generally ends up, they put their names on buildings and stuff. They use it to get more donors. So, Nebraska, I think, is in good shape because you have money and will. Will is important, and you have brand. As long as you can assign a market value and a CAGR to something. Compound annual growth rate, people are going to throw money at it because money makes more money. Ohio State has a brand. Most of the Big Ten has very strong branding, incredibly strong branding. If you walked into Goldman Sachs tomorrow, which isn't far away from me, you threw a pen down the hallway, you'll hit like 3 Penn State grads. It's like that's their minor league. Like those people make a lot of money. They donate back. There are a lot of places that are they're as close to permanent as you can get in Americana. So they will forge an alliance, and they will. That's what the Big Ten and the SEC signaled when they got together. They're like, we are going to do this.
Oh, do you think so?
Yeah.
I guess I just kind of, there's part of me that, okay, let's see. Linda Wilkins says, whoops, that's it. John, deal with it. It's only and always about money. And, honest to God, that's the honest truth. That's what college football is. But there's still a part of me that wants to be romantic about give it the rah-rah. You know what I mean? University of Nebraska.
It's funny you say that, because I'm actually writing about that this week. It's in my head. I haven't written it yet, but I'll publish on Wednesday. And I'm doing it. I'm using Michigan as the muse. So Michigan's the reigning national champion. You get to choose if it's the greatest story, the most romantic story, the bad guys winning, totally illegitimate. You get to decide what happened this past season. And if you want Nebraska football and college football or anything about college sports to stay like sepia tinted from your youth, or you can strip out with cognitive dissonance the things that you don't like about it, the world can be, you can play God in your own perspective. Unfortunately, I have to write about this every week, but I have to acknowledge some of that stuff, the realities that I don't enjoy. But most people, you get to decide. So it can be whatever you choose it to be.
Well, John,
wow,
John, in the name of rah-rah, I would not be, I would be doing you personally and all of us at CornNation a disservice if we didn't point out that this is the day after, and I know you did your quick reaction, the day after that our wonderful Nebraska Cornhusker women's basketball team, like Ohio State, took out Iowa and Caitlin Clark. And like Ohio State, we got a meltdown performance from their coach afterwards, because she takes losing worse than a 6-year-old takes having his toys taken away. And I didn't want to be disappointed. Did you happen to hear about that one, Ramzy?
I watched the game.
Did you? But did you see what she did after the game?
I didn't watch the press conference. I watched the Nebraska Iowa game, and I haven't. If I wanted to see a basketball team melt down in the fourth quarter like Iowa did, I would just watch an Ohio State men's basketball game.
Yes,
but no. What happened was, she really had to get out of there fast. But so Iowa's staying in the locker room forever after the game. So Nebraska comes out. What's going on? And they said, "You guys go ahead and do your press conference." And in the middle of the first question, you hear her in the background shrieking in the hall, "Yeah, this is not Big Ten protocol. This is bullshit."
I didn't see it. I read it.
Oh, yeah. We have a plane to catch, and they played music during our free throws, and I was just like, "Thank you." Now it's complete. But yes, that was the one. And you had people who'd driven from Iowa City who were lined up at about 6, 7 in the morning for tickets. So that this was going to be the coronation, and God, I just love fucking it up for them. And you don't get the record, you don't get a win. I guess we couldn't get lucky like you and have Caitlin go barreling into somebody, then do a little fake pirouette and collapse like she did in Columbus. But we'll take what we can get, and just wanted to point out how much joy that brought me in an otherwise kind of boring, in between football season shenanigans going on. But anyway, thank you, John, for allowing me that slightly more.
Well, we're going to go further because I'm not done with Ramzy. We're going to go over now. Todd isn't here, and I'm not feeling overwhelmed. There you go. That's what it is. What the hell is, you mentioned basketball. How are people taking this basketball season?
In Columbus?
I mean, this is not normal. This is not normal. Normally, right now, people are looking at the Big Ten and they go, "It's a bad conference this year." Why? Because Northwestern's good. Nebraska's up there. Minnesota is like 500. Nobody expected that. And Ohio State and Michigan are at the bottom of this conference. What the hell, man?
It's just lousy. It's a lousy product. Just about even the best teams in the Big Ten, like we can usually have like this weird optimism going into the NCAA tournament. I'm not a conference pride guy. Like I don't give a shit if Nebraska wins or loses in the tournament or any other team. But like it's a terrible basketball conference right now. And this, I think,
You think so?
is the accumulation of recruiting, poor March performance, which sort of forebodes poor recruiting. Because how do you recruit against the Big Ten schools? Oh, you want to play like 1 or 0 games in March and April? Yeah, go play in the Big Ten. They haven't. It is an antiquated product in Columbus. Chris Holtmann won't be around another year.
Yeah,
which is, we were talking about what kind of wiring you need to be an effective football coach at a big program. He is like the world's nicest guy, ultimate dad, like just a really elegant and sweet man and a very mediocre basketball coach.
yeah, he needs to not be that way.
Yeah, and Nebraska's had a couple guys like that too. I don't think currently trending in the right direction. Right now, women's basketball in Columbus has been exceptional with McGriff. When they beat Iowa, that was a top 10 matchup. So Nebraska's was like a true upset. That was more like a heavyweight, like they were throwing haymakers the whole game when they played in Columbus. Women's sports and so we can talk about how the Big Ten is a super conference now with football. It's mediocre with men's basketball. Nebraska women's volleyball is incredible. Ohio State men's volleyball is incredible. Like there are some really interesting non-revenue sports, which I would not have paid attention to if I were not, owning a Ohio State media company or subscribing to Big Ten Network. There is a lot of if you like sports and competition, there's plenty to be found. It's just not in the traditional ways that we were accustomed to in winter. Men's basketball is garbage right now. Volleyball's over now, but women's basketball is exceptional.
Well, and hey, don't forget that our softball team got probably the biggest, arguably the biggest transfer in any sport. And true to Nebraska, she goes out and gets hurt right away, like in the 3rd inning of her first game. And it looks like she's going to be okay, but obviously that generated a lot more interest in softball, and I've been writing about that the past couple of years, and we're ramping that up. But I was just like, I can't believe I'm seeing this. I'm just wondering if we've got to get Dylan Raiola a bodyguard and just make sure a car doesn't run him over or something, before kickoff here in September. Because after that happened, I'm starting to fear for that poor young man's well-being. But anyway,
I know a little bit too much about him because I thought he was going to be at Ohio State for like 8 months or however long it was.
No, I remember when he committed. That
yep.
Once we got a good coach, we were always going to be in a good position with him. And I was really starting to believe up until about I was still believing up till about November he was going to flip to us. And then I kind of gave it up. But when I had a friend of mine call me, hey, I think he's flipping, it didn't surprise me at all. It surprised me when he committed to Ohio State. I understood Frost had just screwed that pooch. But Georgia, that one surprised me. I thought we had him, and I know how silly that sounds on the face of it, but just the way he was communicating with all the other recruits in the class, I was like, I really think this is going to happen. When it didn't, I'm like, well, he's done it before. Let's see if he does it again, and it worked out.
Georgia was funny, right? Georgia
that?
Quarterbacks are like Ohio State quarterbacks before Ryan Day. Like, why would you go play there? You're a quarterback. Play something else, not quarterback. So that was an interesting choice. But yeah, good for Nebraska.
So Ohio State women's basketball is number 1 in the conference.
Two. In conference. Well,
in conference,
they're number 2 national.
In the conference, they're 1 game ahead of Iowa, thanks to us. And Nebraska, I believe, plays them next. Plays Ohio State next. So that should be interesting. One more question, and then I'll let you go. And then we're going to talk a little bit about Nebraska because it's a Nebraska show. And what about baseball?
There you
go. Do you follow it at all?
I mean, I'm wearing a Guardians hat. Do I follow college baseball? No, I'm from Ohio.
Yeah. Okay.
You got options. Columbus is a AAA.
Well,
town.
Ohio State baseball has not been, where it was just a few
Yeah,
years
it's on
ago.
hard times. I've been to Bill Davis Stadium. I've seen better times, but Ohio State is one of, I can't remember, it's like 6 schools that has a football, basketball, baseball, and for the 4 national title. They like very few schools have it. I think Ohio State won the national title in baseball 100 years ago.
Like in 1956, I think. Something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Any closing remarks?
It's a Nebraska show. Appreciate the volleyball program. I am not like being condescending when I say that I like college football better when Nebraska is interesting. And Nebraska football has been interesting in some pretty pedantic ways recently. I think you got a guy that can, if you can keep him around, will give you a solid decade that you'll be proud of and think like, all right, we're finally out of the post Osborne malaise that we kind of slogged through. I'm a Youngstown homer, and the Pelini family is dear to my heart. I'm not going to poison the conversation by telling you what you did wrong there.
Right.
But you survived it. Right. And the frosting is inexplicable. I'll never figure out how that went so wrong. But getting Matt Rule out of it, I think is going to prove to be something that was worth it.
I guess I would explain it in one way in which you look at an employee that has failed, and you look at them, and you could go through all this stuff, or you could sum it up in one way, and that would be character flaw. And then you just end the conversation about that employee and you'd move on. And
you should have
there
had
you
some
go.
sort of guidance, some sort of support system. You can't allow someone to fail and be, have everyone pointing at him. They should have taken better care of him. And I think
tough. There are a lot of people that tried that and just either he ended up with completely the wrong. Well, I think a lot of people tried that and they were unsuccessful, and we'll just leave that at that.
It's past tense now.
Yep.
Yeah. All right, Ramzy, thank you. We should talk more often. We have a long off season ahead of us. There you go. Take care of yourself, and thank you for joining us. And Andy, we'll talk about Nebraska for a little bit.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
Take care, Ramzy.
We'll talk to you. Be good.
Yep.
See you, Ramzy.
Bye. Okay. I don't know. I don't remember how I met him or how I started talking to him, but he knows his stuff about Ohio State. He very, very, very well. Okay, Nebraska time. We're actually 8 minutes over. We're going to do this just because, we had a lot of stuff happen.
Roll the sleeves up on that robe. What happened recently, John?
Well, this happened.
Okay.
You know what? I got all so animated there. I got all hot. So
tell you what, while John's undressing, Linda asks, how did Jordy get hurt? I was watching it happen, and I was actually wondering if it was the condition of the field, because that field on Friday night looked like trash, and it looked better in the Saturday games, but it did turn out. I went back and found a clip where I could hear the announcers, and they were saying that pitchers had been complaining about that field because it's clay. It's what they haven't made softball fields here out of that for years. Because now that you slide around more, it's got the stuff that can absorb the moisture. It's just a better field. And you'd have to drag it a lot. And that field didn't look like it was dragged. You could just see cleat marks and like it almost like mud, even though it wasn't that wet. And apparently that's what happened. You could see her when they slowed it down, and she caught that foot, and it just straightened her leg out and popped the knee a little. And it just looked like classic hyperextension. The worst case scenario would be that, it's the ACL, because that's also how the ACL explodes is when that knee just comes in a straight-legged jam like that. I don't think that's what happened. They said on the Sunday game against Utah Valley, she was a full participant in all the pregame stuff, was going full speed, but Rhonda just wanted to hold her out of games till she could get her back to Lincoln and get her looked at. And I suspect she's going to be okay. I think a worst case might be she sits out the New Mexico tournament coming up, but I don't think it's anything too serious.
All right, you are going to start a softball program on YouTube, or
Yes.
with this platform in the what, next week or when?
Well, it depends.
No yet.
It just depends when we get some of the videos and photos we talked about, so we can get you can give us our intro. But we're pretty much ready to go anytime. I suspect, since I haven't heard back from him yet, that it'll probably we'll shoot for next week.
Are you going to do this live, or are you going to do this?
I'd like to go ahead and do it live. If we're going to make our mistakes, and people should be able to enjoy that too. Say they were there. Say they were there, and these shitheads didn't know that they're their heads from their asses. And
all right, Fred Sacco says, "What's John's alternative robe? White for away games. Fuck Iowa all over them." I will. That's a good idea. I need an alternate robe for away games. Let's see. James Boardman says, "Do you think college athletics is on the verge of a players' union?" Yes.
I think it's already happening some places. Isn't it? Like very recently.
Here's the thing that we did not discuss with Ramzy is this. When you have a Division II or a Division III, like Dartmouth is ruled that they're going through appeals. Dartmouth appealed. All of this stuff is in the hands of the courts and lawyers. God help us all. But if Division II and Division III, they rule that they're employees. The way that you have them not be employees is you just release control of them. In other words, you rule somebody as an employee because you're controlling them enough. It doesn't matter if they make money for a business or not. There's certain stipulations where you have control over them to the point. And the way that they would get around that was turning everything into a club sport, basically, which is what I brought up before.
And I also think that they can call them, with everything just being basically free agency, and you can I don't know, you're limited, but you can leave whenever you want. That's almost like their contract employees, instead, almost like self-employed, where you do, your Schedule C, and instead of because they're not being paid by the schools at all, which makes it a little tough. That's why I always laughed, like with some of I call them the angry old white men, were saying they've got to get a hold of this NIL and put a cap on it, and it's like, how can they put a cap on something they have no control over? It's like, these are other people paying them in such a way that it doesn't involve the school's name at all. So the school can't control that. But I think Lane Kiffin suggested that once, and I'm like, Lane, I get it. I know, you kind of like more control and all that. But yeah, this is just the courts going, why shouldn't they be able to go out and and sell T-shirts if people will buy them? Or if somebody wants to get their pay $5 for their autograph at a Mazda lot, then what does that, why the hell, that just makes me wonder, why was that ever not allowed, other than, I guess, no one really took it to court.
Well, here's the thing with it. When you look at the NFL, and I think I brought this up before, when you look at the NFL, what do they have? They have a players union.
Players union. Yeah.
Yeah. And what does that give them? It gives them collective bargaining agreements. Right. And what do we, the public, get out of those collective bargaining agreements? We get public knowledge of their salaries. We get public knowledge of their contracts. Right now, college sports is in mayhem and complete fucking nightmare, because there's no control over that. If they go and they become a union, I don't know how they're going to organize this, but if they become a union, then they will have collective bargaining, and then all these nil contracts will become public. Right?
No, I don't think that would enter into the collective bargaining at all. That's completely separate from the school.
Right, it is, but you'd have an organization. It wouldn't be the schools. It probably isn't going to be the schools anymore. You're looking at, like we talked about, the Big Ten and SEC creating something that, I don't know how this is all going to work, but I know that if you go ahead.
No, I was just saying, though, collective bargaining is just the things that they can control with each other, and what they make in NIL is just, it's like, here's A, the school, here's B, the players. Collective bargaining would never, collective bargaining, NIL would never be part of the collective bargaining, because that's something they can do on their own that the school has no say over whatsoever. If collective bargaining, or let's say if they do get a union and are allowed to collectively bargaining, the next step is, hey, you're going to have to pay us. The schools will have to pay the players. And talk all you want about the scholarships being enough. This this is a revenue drawing sport. Alone to that sport, and you've got you've got the stuff that the university sells with their number on it, but not their name maybe. But you've got all the concessions, you've got all that, and then all this goes. Well, if you're making all this money, then why aren't the people solely responsible for others paying for this stuff, paying to go to the games, paying for a cable deal, they're paying for a cable service so they can watch them on television? Then it becomes, well, isn't this monumentally stupid that they don't get any kind of a salary? And I just feel like that's the first step, though, is getting to call them a union. Then as a union, they can go, hey, we'd like salaries. And it'll happen. Yeah, it'll happen. And it'll still be woefully underpaid, because right now they lose their minds. Hey, some guy's making $1.5 million a year. And what a drop in the bucket that is. Like you got a Heisman winner, made $1.5 million a year in NIL. I would recommend, it's out of print, but it's pretty easy to find. There's a book Rick Thielander wrote. He used to write for Sports Illustrated, and he wrote a book back in like '89 called The 100-Yard Lie, where where at the very end he lays out a very well-defined solution, and it's finally now starting to come to pass. And what he suggested was you get the 50 teams or so, 30 to 50 teams that are serious. They then become they get to still use the university logos and stadiums and all that, but they get a flat salary. I think at that time he said $50,000 a year. The NFL kicks in, and it's like, yeah, good luck the NFL kicking in on that.
Right. Yeah.
but yeah, here's the thing though, is you now make it a league, and then they do not go to school while they play football, but each season they play, they get a full year of free school to cash in at any time that they like in the future. And that's just a non-negotiable part of it. The teams that don't join that become true college football with, a coach that's also teaching a class. I don't believe there's scholarships there, or maybe there's just scholarships there. But basically, you're a student athlete. You're limited to 2 hours of practice, 5 days a week in season. There's not spring ball or any of that. And then they actually had a plan how you can jump from one to the other if you really want, etc. But I encourage people to read that. And if you don't want to go through the whole book, just get it to flip to the back. And it's crazy that in 1989, he's saying that's where this should go. And that's right. If we do it, he's like, and he was really like kind of negative about the whole thing. He's like, I feel like the whole thing is fucked and too far gone. But here's my suggestion: use it or don't. And like double middle fingered everybody at the, on his way out the door at the end of the book. But it's really looking pretty present right now.
All right, Linda Wilkins asks, what is the actual yearly cost to the university of a full scholarship athlete? Well,
I think it'd be in the 15 to 20 grand range.
Here's the thing. It's a made up number.
Yeah.
Because basically when you look at budgets, and all of this stuff is about how athletic departments between universities make up their budgets. And I don't have any insight into the University of Nebraska and how they do budget figures. But when you look at the athletic department, they kind of stand alone. They have their own budget. They don't take money from the university in student fees. The academic side doesn't give them any money. So basically the academic side takes away from money from the, the athletic department for the scholarships. And keep in mind, they're providing books. They probably provide room and board or meals, something, they provide other stuff than just here's the scholarship, which is really just a fuzzy thing that exists in the universe. It's a made up number.
Yeah. They're getting training tables.
Athletic departments have to be nonprofit. So I would guess, and I'm just making this shit up, by the way. I do know that they just kind of make up numbers, but I mean, if you made $150 million in an athletic department, you don't want to show a profit. So you just, can shove all that stuff to the academic side and say, well, our scholarships cost 50 grand this year. And last year they cost 36. I doubt they do it that way. They're probably not that flexible, but in the future, who the hell knows?
I don't even think, because I used to get an earful from, the anti-football crowd going, how much stuff they're taking away from the university? And I said, yeah, I know from the students. And I said, I know exactly how much they're taking away. Nothing, because the athletic department operates 100% independently of the UNL, everything else at UNL, the academic side and all that. So no, it's like it's not costing the students a dime. But the place where it did cost them a dime was UNO, where they, I think, spent the entire student fund keeping the football team afloat for several years there at the end.
Yeah.
When it was hemorrhaging like $2-3 million a year. But no, at Lincoln, that they don't need any money from the academic side. They've got their own millions pouring in.
Okay, we're gonna have to wrap up soon because we are old and tired.
Maybe have to use the bathroom.
Stamina. Yeah, I'm not on coke, that kind of thing. Never mind me says, what are the men's chances of making the tournament? I think they're pretty good. I mean, you defend the home court.
They are.
I think people are being a little bit too
they're 53
negative toward it, but what?
They're 53 right now. That those 20-point losses, they're like ranked overall like 53rd after losing, and then but beating Michigan was beating, like, I think Michigan's just awful this year. No, they're going to be unless they get a road win or two that means something,
right? Or
just a road win period. They're probably going to be in that, on that edge discussion. It's nice to have the win over Purdue. That win over Wisconsin's just looking like, a barrel of dog shit right now, because I think everybody's just been beating the piss out of them. Thanks Wisconsin. you just know how to ruin everything. God,
well, you know what they did? They went out on the road and they got they got annihilated at Rutgers. And I'm going to disagree with Ramzy a little bit. I don't think the Big Ten is a terrible basketball conference. I do think it's good from top to bottom. And you know what? As an old man, I'm going to say this. Tom Izzo said this, and I'm going to echo his thoughts. Basically, those younger people just don't have as much mental toughness as its old crusty bastards do, because
every old person for 1,000 years.
Yeah, our parents didn't push everything out of the way.
Oh God! In 1723, they were going, "Oh, these kids today have it so easy." We now let them. We now make them a new pair of shoes every 5 years instead of 8 years, and that we cobble together with our bare hands. And
okay, Vince Watson says, "What night is the new live show going to be on, Andy?"
I believe right now we are shooting for Tuesday.
Okay.
I'm going to say probably Tuesday around this same time.
Okay. Well, there you go.
But I'll pop an article up and try to let everybody know a few times before, a couple days before, all that. So
MWI says, when this finally becomes NFL light, what's the point in bragging about your minor league championship? Because we'll still pretend.
Yeah. We're still.
What the hell?
No one's changing names, and your franchise is never in danger of moving from Lincoln, Nebraska, to St. Louis, Missouri, or whatever. They'll still be your Huskers. But now you get to yell at them now, though. Hey, you make all that money and fuck up, you jerk, just like the NFL players.
I have a whiteboard right over here, and it has a bunch of stuff that it is there to remind me of things.
Well,
to not forget when I'm doing these.
Right over there, I totally don't have a whiteboard. Awesome.
Okay. On that whiteboard, there's 3 words.
Oh, no.
And the reason why anybody creates content, writes a book, things like that, there's 3 reasons for it. Inform, which is what we do for you guys all the time. Entertain. Oh, my God, we do that, don't we? And then the third is escape. And that's really what sports is. That's especially college sports. When you look at it, we escape when we look at it and we go, God, Nebraska women's basketball is down in the 4th quarter. There's no way they're going to come back and win this game, but we still believe, and then they do it. And that's the escape from all the other shit we got going on in life. That's why we'll still pretend, even if it's NFL light, that Nebraska is the best college team in the history of the world. Because, it's still better than, I don't know, dealing with everyday life that you got to go into. Like if I brought up politics or something. MWI says, Ramzy gave us 8 wins. I'm partying naked tonight.
Oh, we've heard that before. All right.
James Boardman says, get off my lawn. And Charles Hullett says, and that's the way it was, and we liked it. Tiger Shark Diver says, I only go to Missouri to buy illegal fireworks. That's the best reason for Missouri to exist. Justin Rogge says, what if you forget about the whiteboard, John? Well, it's right there. It you know what? It alarms every once
See
in
what
a
he
while.
did with board there, don't you?
Okay. All right. What else do we have? We had a nice win over Iowa.
I thought we were wrapping up.
We are wrapping up. This is
Okay.
the wrap up.
All right.
We had a nice win over Iowa. But the softball team got shelled in 2 games without Jordy Ball.
Well, she was getting shelled before she got out of there, but I think that's why I said something was wrong even before she got hurt. I mean, she in 2 and 3rd innings, I think she gave up two hits, walked 3 people, threw 3 wild pitches. So something was wrong from the beginning. I think it was just that goofy field, and I know everybody pitched on it, but for whatever reason, it was affecting some different than others. It took Kaylin Kinney, who ended up pitching 7 scoreless innings and getting the last 2 wins. But the first game she got in, she was having trouble finding the plate and getting knocked around. So maybe it was just one of those things you had to get used to, or they dried the field and chopped it up a little more. But anyway.
All right. Is there anything else you want to say?
Andy is tired. He took too much LSD with that tie-dye shirt. Hey, this thing is awesome. If I could stand up with the little hair. This is one of the shirts they made for the Lithuania Olympic team. This is a reproduction of it in 1992 when they did. Russia had just broken up, and they were the biggest draw, like significantly less, but still the second biggest draw after the Dream Team, because the Grateful Dead sponsored that team, like paid for everything. And
Really?
So, yeah.
I don't remember that.
And they won the bronze medal. The U.S. beat them in the semifinals, and they had Arvydas Sabonis and Šarūnas Maršalionis, who then, even though they were old, went and played for a few years in the NBA. And I believe Sabonis has a son playing in the NBA now. But that was just kind of one of the neat stories of the Olympics. And I saw one of these things, and $50, hell yeah, I'll pop that. And on the back, it just proudly proclaims like a bronze medal, 1988. So that's the reason for my tie-dye tonight.
It's nice looking shirt.
Yeah, it's actually.
I should look into this one of those.
Yeah, it's actually really quality. I mean, it's a thick T-shirt. I love it.
Oh, look at this. The Rock on Randy. That is a kick-ass shirt.
Oh, thanks, Manny.
Fred Sacco says, Andy's lava lamp is fading faster than our former head coach's teams in the 4th quarter. And then he says, let Andy go. He has to pee. Okay. Good night, Andy.
My man. Good night,
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.